Hi and assalamualaikum everyone. I hope you guys are having a wonderful day today. My name is Nurin Sofia and today I will be your moderator for today's forum. Our forum's topic today is actually a very interesting as we'll be discussing about the constant contradiction of sex education. As we all are aware, cases like rape, premarital sex, and more increases as time passes. In conjunction with our discussion and issue today, we actually invited three panelists with different backgrounds. Our first panelist is Madam Fatin, who works as a teacher in Sapura High School. Next, we have Dr. Hani, who is a psychiatrist. Last but not least is Miss Hafifah Nadia, who is actually a member of sex education activists. In our forum today, we will actually be discussing about different views of sex education. Madam Fatin actually believed that sex education is irrelevant, and the other two panelists think otherwise, that sex education is very much important. I also actually wonder why sex education is important, and I'm pretty sure people out there are too. I would love for Dr. Hani to start our forum today by starting off with why sex education is important.
Thank you, Ms. Nurin. So generally, when we talk about sexual education, most of the communities always thought that it's all about teaching children and teenagers on how to do sex. But that is absolutely incorrect. As stated by WHO 2006, children's and teenagers' sexual education encompass dimension of physical, emotional, mental, and social well-being concerning sexuality. So in my opinion, sex education is important because it could increase people's knowledge and promote their understanding of sexual and reproductive health. And today, I would like to emphasize more on sexual education in early childhood. In this case, sex education actually provides accurate, complete, and appropriate information on human sexuality, including safety prevention. Yes, it does involve exposing usages of birth control such as condoms and birth control pills. So, of news in mass media about baby dumping cases and teenage pregnancy. And I think this is all because of the lack of proper sexual education. So, simply put on early exposure about sexuality is important to increase their awareness and prepare themselves to deal with situations that involve sexual activities. Thank you. So what do you think, Madam Fatih?
Yes, right. Thank you so much, Doctor. I think when you said sex education could increase people's knowledge is a valid point, but at the same time, for me, I think it already implies in schools that biology and science, we already have that subject to help children to expose about sexual education. So I think in Form 3, when we were 15 years old, we already learned about reproduction health and reproduction system in humans anatomy. So for me, it's a waste of time to learn an additional subject regarding sexual education. So when you said something about it encompass dimension of physical and emotional as well as mental and social well-being, I think in school we already have counselings to do that for the kids. And consuming birth pills at a young age will disrupt people's hormones. And also in various studies, between 0.8% and 40.7% of participants reported the experience of a broken condom. In some studies, the rates of sex with a broken condom were as high as 32.8%. So it's very pointless for people to learn about sexual education when in fact the studies already show that sexual prevention is not relevant. And what's the point of sex education anyway when it was talked about just now that it's not going to help some of these young kids to prevent teen pregnancies? So that is my point for Dr. Hani.
Okay, so we are only a few minutes into our discussion, but it's already heating up. I understand better in why sex education is important as it increases our knowledge in sexual health. But Madam Fatin actually made a good point that biology had already taught us about this in school, and it's a waste of time. Other than that, with the statistics given of people experiencing broken condoms, I can see that safety prevention is not as safe as it was advertised to us. Aside from that, I believe Ms. Afifah have something to add on why she stand her ground on why sex education is very important. So please, Ms. Afifah.
Right, okay, thank you. To me, I think that One of the reasons why sex education is important because sex education helps youth to understand, value, and feel autonomy over their bodies. Simply put, it's about making them understand about consent. So body autonomy is a human right to be in control of your own body. So when we teach this at a young age, children or youth know it's unacceptable to force others to do something they don't want to do. In the context of sex education, this involves when they are in situations that counts as sexual activities. So if we teach them about consent, that they have their right to say no when they don't want to perform any activity that makes them uncomfortable, this helps them to understand when does it count as sexual assault. So this is because around 25% of college women and 15% of college men, according to NISVS, those are victims of forced sex during their time in college, and sadly, 90% of them do not report it. So this is maybe because only in the future do they understand or process the memory or the trauma that they have been sexually harassed. So in conclusion, I think that if we implement sex ed at a young age, we can help victims to prepare them when they go through these situations and create a comfortable environment for them to speak up about being sexually assaulted.
Okay, so it is scary how sexual assault is very common nowadays. Honestly, I actually experienced sexual assault when I was a child, and I wasn't even aware that it was sexual violence back then. But as we grow older, people are more brave to talk about sexual assault, and that's when I realized that I actually experienced sexual assault before. But even so, it was still very hard for me to open up about it and acknowledge that things like that could actually happen to me. So I really hope that young girls and boys out there doesn't have to go through what I go through. And if it ever happened to them, I just hope that they are not as clueless and naive as I am. So I think it is very important for them to be aware of sexual consent and when they were sexual mostly cover. Okay, so moving on, I believe Madam Fatin are eager to speak on her behalf on why she opposed sex education. So Madam Fatin, whenever you are ready.
Thank you so much, Noreen. Okay, so when it comes to why I think sex education is irrelevant, for me, I think it is a motive for initiating sexual behavior. So this will lead to sexual education providing primary information about sexuality will stimulate the individual's curiosity to search for more sexuality information. And this promotes pornography addiction at a very young age. Nearly half of children between the ages of 9 until 16 experience the regular exposure to sexual images. Young people who frequently engage with explicit sexual content which exhibit violent and objectifying themes are more likely to imitate risky and violent sexual practices and to be more accepting of sexual objectification in society. They are also more likely to perceive other people's values and worth solely based on sex appeal. So, for me, as a mother of three and also a teacher of so many young students, I can never imagine that happening to my children if they experience pornography at a very young age. And at the same time, for me, I think when we talk openly about sexual education and sexual stuff, this will lead to them openly talk about private parts with different gender, which brings awkwardness and uncomfortability among the peers and friends. So, what do you think about that, Doctor?
Thank you, but I'm sorry. I would say that I oppose with your opinion because I think curiosity exists in everybody, no matter they are young or old. Furthermore, I know it can't be denied that most of children are already exposed to sex-related materials through online media. However, online media doesn't necessarily provide age-appropriate and, in fact, may provide biased and distorted messages. This further complicates them to distinguish between inaccurate and accurate information. Thus, here is where sexual education exists to cut them to be on the right path. In addition, sexual education is more than just about initiating sexual behavior, and it's supposed to be granted through proper channels such as school, a person with credential, and even psychologists might be more eligible to give advices. So these people know what topics to focus on, such as the health of sex organ and consent. They will not come out with such explicit sexual content. Those kind of content surely have nothing to do with sexual education. I think those should be under parents' guidance. So in conclusion, I think Without proper sexual education, people will get unreliable knowledge about it on the internet or even from their partner, which in that case, provide sexual activities. Thank you.
Okay, so I think from Madam Fatin's point of view as a teacher and also as a parent, it is understandable that sex education can be seen as a motive to initiate sexual behavior and generates curiosity, especially among youngsters. As a parent, of course, you don't want like your child to be exposed to pornography and all. But looking from a psychiatrist's point of view, who had a better understanding of the nature of humans, I cannot agree more with Dr. Hani that curiosity exists in everyone and it's basically our nature to be curious. I mean, we all as a youngsters are very curious creature about so many things, and without that curiosity we would be as naive now. So from here we can see that sex education is more than initiating sexual behavior, but it is actually about gaining knowledge. So I think it is great for Dr. Hani to put out her insight like that. Anyways, Madam Fatin, I actually had a question that I am really curious to know about. I noticed that when we talk about sex education, it is somehow always had something to do with the religious and religion, and then it is a very debatable topic among religious figures. Would you care to please enlighten us on how so that religion and sex education can be relatable?
Okay, so when we talk about sexual education, for me as a parent, the first thing that is going to come up in my mind is just basically talking about sex. So this will definitely tainted someone's ethical and modesty. So if kids receive a sex education, it is possible that we think premarital sexual behaviors are acceptable. People might think it's a green light to do things that are against the religion, such as Islam, Christianity, and even Hinduism and Buddhism. So Islam forbids this thing for a reason, because it is permissible for a person to get into a relationship. Hence, this will lead to much likely unwanted accidents. And partners who get into a relationship immerse themselves with the idea of having sexual intercourse is normal, because it is something that they do regularly. And to counterattack Ms. Afifa's point in the first part is that for them, consent is not something to prioritize, as they agree sexual intercourse is generally consented between two individuals when they get into a relationship. So yeah, I think that's why parents nowadays are too scared to talk about sexual education, because we might think that it has to do with sex, and we are very scared for the younger generations to get into the idea of having sex is normalized between the youngsters. So what do you think about that, Miss Afifa? I really like to hear your bits and bobs about why sexual education maybe tainted someone's ethical and modesty.
Personally, I think, in my own opinion, I think even without sexual education, it is proven nowadays that premarital sex happens too. And there's a research that sexual violence is common in youth. Most female victims of rape, about 79.6%, experience their first rape before the age of 25, and almost half experience their first rape before age of 18. So before the age of 18, they are minors and they are kids. So I think it's better that kids learn the correct information from credible people, such as what Dr. Hani said, instead of their friends, movies, or television shows. I do understand that Islam forbids premarital sex and other sexual-related activities before marriage, but it has nothing to do with sex education. It does not promote premarital sex. However, and also in Islam, the Islam encourages sex education to be taught to youngsters because it counts as knowledge. However, what's stopping sex education from being taught in schools is cultural upbringing, not religious training. Because certain cultures are ignorant when it comes to the topic of sex issues, because yes, it is a taboo, and a lot of people are scared to talk about it because yes, it will. We think that it will taint someone's modesty when in fact it actually doesn't.
Okay, so I think now I understand why it is a very hot topic among religious people. Basically, when talking about sex education, it is a big taboo among these people. But to be calling themselves religious and among our culture, is it kind of like seem as if they are not knowledgeable enough to be talking about this on behalf of everyone? Because just like Ms. Afel stated, Islam actually encourages sex education. So these religious people actually should know more. So it's more about our culture, And actually, this shows how shallow our education system is for not doing more research into sex education, and because of that, we have this confusion about what actually is sex education. So I think we already reached the end of the forum. We can all agree that sex education should need to be further research for it to be taught to school and like to clear out the sky, to clear out the like sky for sex education. And at the end of the day, the word sex education is still a taboo and debatable to all, and we all respect each other's opinion as we all have a valid reasons to stand our ground. I think this is a really exciting discussion. So, um, so I think that's it to express my. I think we are running out of time right now. So to express my gratitude, I would like to thank the three of you to come here to the three of you, Dr. Hani, Madam Fatin, and also Miss Afifa to come here to be our panelists and join us despite your busy schedule. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nurin.
And I also would like to thank our viewers for joining us today, and I hope you guys are more open to views on sex education. Thank you so much.
Okay, goodbye everyone. Thank you.